Imagine you are standing on the deck of a wooden ship, somewhere in the North Atlantic. The air is cold and sharp. The sky is a dull sheet of gray. All you can hear is the steady creak of the hull and the rhythm of the waves, rising and falling like a giant, restless chest. There is no land in sight, only water in every direction, stretching to the edge of the world. For hours, the sea has been calm, too calm. The wind that carried your ship forward has faded into a faint, uneasy breeze. The waves that once slapped against the bow now glide by in long, smooth swells. The older sailors grow quiet. They have seen weather like this before, but the way they look at the water says this is something different. Then someone notices it. In the distance, the surface seems to bulge. Not like a single wave, but like a section of the ocean is slowly rising from below. Bubbles break through the water, first in small clusters, then in frantic bursts, as if the sea itself is beginning to boil. A dark shape appears, too wide to be a whale, too long to be drifting wood. More shapes follow, curling and uncurling in the water. At first, they look like thick ropes or tangled seaweed. Only when one of them slaps against the side of the ship, leaving a wet, glistening trail, do you realize what you are seeing. Tentacles. Not the size of a man's arm, but as thick as the masts above your head. This is how countless sailors across Norway, Iceland, and Greenland imagine their worst fear. A colossal beast lurking in the depths, large enough to wrap its arms around a ship and drag it beneath the waves. They gave it a name that would echo through legend and history alike: the Kraken. In the oldest stories, the Kraken is almost beyond comprehension. Some tales insist that when it rises to the surface, its back resembles an island. Sailors speak of seeing rocks, trees, even patches of soil on its enormous body. Ships, desperate for rest, anchor near it, believing they have found land. Only later do they realize that their island is breathing. The creature begins to sink. The water rushes downward with it, swirling into a massive whirlpool. The ship is caught in the pool, spinning helplessly as men shout prayers and curses into the wind. For those who told these stories, there was no escape. If the Kraken chose you, the sea had already decided your fate. But the legend is not only about terror. It is about the relationship between people and the ocean itself. To medieval sailors, the sea was not just a route between distant places, it was a living, unpredictable force. Storms could rise in minutes. Hidden reefs could tear a ship apart. Icebergs could appear out of the fog like ghosts. At any moment, the water beneath them could change from a flat, peaceful surface into a violent wall of destruction. The Kraken became a symbol of that reality. It was the embodiment of all the unseen dangers hiding below the surface. It explained why some ships vanished without a trace. It gave a face, or rather many tentacled arms, to the incomprehensible power of the ocean. As these stories traveled from ship to ship and port to port, they began to take on a life of their own. Fishermen claimed that when the Kraken was near, the sea suddenly filled with fish. The creature, they said, drew huge schools of fish toward its massive body, feeding on them while smaller boats took advantage of the abundance. The catch would be incredible, almost miraculous. But every fisherman knew the unspoken rule: take what you can and leave before the water starts to change. Because once the sea darkened and the bubbles rose, the time for fishing was over. That was when the monster claimed the ocean for itself. Over generations, the image of the Kraken slowly settled into the form we recognize today: an enormous cephalopod, like a squid or an octopus, but on a scale that feels almost impossible. arms that could circle a ship, a beak that could crush wood and bone, eyes like dim lanterns glowing beneath the surface. It was more than just a creature. It was the ocean's way of reminding humanity that out there, far from land, they were guests in someone else's world.
For a long time, the Kraken lived mainly in stories, traded by sailors and fishermen, spoken, exaggerated, shaped by fear and memory. But eventually, something changed. The monster made a leap from the shifting world of oral tales into the harder lines of written history. In the early 13th century, Icelandic sagas began to mention sea creatures of impossible size. One of the most famous, the saga of Örvar Odre, tells of a huge monster in the Greenland Sea, so large that men mistake its back for land. The description is not identical to the Kraken, but the idea is already there, a living island lurking below the waves. Centuries later, more specific accounts began to appear. In Norwegian folklore, two sea monsters were sometimes distinguished, the Hafgufa and the Lingbakker. The Hafgufa was said to open its massive mouth and create a kind of underwater vacuum, sucking in fish, whales, even ships. Some scholars believe this creature merged over time with the Kraken legend, blending together into one monstrous identity. But the Kraken truly stepped into the written record in the 18th century, thanks to a Norwegian bishop named Erik Pontoppidan. In the 1750s, Pontoppidan published a massive work on the natural history of Norway. This was not a book of fairy tales. It aimed to document real animals, plants, minerals, and phenomena, as understood by the science of his time. And yet, within its pages, the Kraken appears. Pontoppidan describes the creature as the largest sea monster in the world, claiming that it was so big that many thought of it as an island. He repeats reports from fishermen who supposedly saw it rise from the deep, its back covered with small creatures that looked like growths on rock. He notes how fish gather around it, and how sailors could sometimes tell the monster was near when they caught an unusually rich haul. He also writes about terrifying whirlpools that appeared after the Kraken submerged. If a ship happened to be anchored too close, he warns, it could be dragged down as the creature sank. What makes Pontoppidan's account fascinating is not just what he describes, but how he describes it. He does not treat the Kraken as a myth. He considers it a rare but genuine animal, something that science simply has not fully understood. He admits that many aspects are uncertain, but he does not dismiss the witnesses. To him, these Norwegian sailors are reliable observers of the world they live in. Because of his position and his book's influence, Pontoppidan's Kraken reached far beyond the fjords of Norway. Readers in other parts of Europe encountered the creature not as a bedtime story, but as a serious candidate for a real species. The line between legend and zoology blurred. Around the same time, mapmakers were decorating their charts with images of sea monsters. On older maps, creatures resembling giant squids and multi-armed beasts can be seen near dangerous waters, often placed at the edges of known routes. These illustrations served a dual purpose. They warned sailors about treacherous areas, shallow reefs, strong currents, uncharted regions, and they also played to human imagination, turning unknown ocean into a gallery of possible horrors. The Kraken, whether named directly or depicted indirectly, fit perfectly into this world. It became part of the mental landscape of the sea. When a ship disappeared, people did not need to see tentacles. The idea that a massive creature could be responsible felt as reasonable as blaming a storm. Of course, not everyone was convinced.
Some scholars argued that the Kraken stories were exaggerations of real animals, whales, large squids, or groups of smaller fish mistaken for one huge shape. Others suggested that fear and superstition were enough to turn any strange sight at sea into a monster. But even skeptics could not completely ignore the reports coming from the north. There were too many stories, too many similar descriptions, all pointing towards something immense moving beneath the waves. The question shifted from, does the Kraken exist, to what exactly are people actually seeing? That question would follow the legend into a new age, an age of scientific expeditions, deep-sea cables, and strange carcasses washing ashore, hinting that somewhere in the ocean's darkness, enormous tentacled creatures really were lurking.
By the 19th century, science was changing the way people saw the world. Oceans were being crossed by steamships. Undersea telegraph cables linked continents. Naturalists collected specimens from every corner of the globe. The sea was still mysterious, but it no longer belonged only to myth and fear. And yet, the Kraken refused to disappear. In 1853, strange, long-armed remains washed ashore in Iceland. Locals spoke of enormous tentacles, wider than a man's arm, with suction cups lined like rows of tail coins. Bits and pieces of similar creatures had been found before, but now scientists paid closer attention. Slowly, a picture began to form. There really were colossal cephalopods living in the deep. The creature would eventually be named Architeuthis dux, the giant squid. Reports started appearing from sailors who claimed to have seen these animals alive. In 1861, the crew of the French ship Alecton spotted a large squid near the Canary Islands. They fired harpoons and tried to haul it on board. The body tore apart under its own weight, but the men recovered enough of it to measure one long arm, stretching several meters. For the public, these discoveries were electrifying. Newspapers printed dramatic sketches, huge squids attacking ships, their tentacles wrapped around masts and rigging. The Kraken had found a new body, now backed by real flesh and bone. But even as evidence accumulated, confusion remained. Giant squid normally live far below the surface. They do not rise in full view of ships, and they are not known to attack humans. Most of the carcasses that washed ashore were damaged, incomplete, or decayed by the time scientists examined them. Length estimates varied wildly. Some people believed the giant squid explained every Kraken legend. Others thought it was only part of the story. After all, many tales described a creature so vast that it made entire ships look like toys. Even the largest squid on record, stretching longer than a bus, seemed small compared to the island-sized monsters of folklore. Still, the presence of real, enormous cephalopods changed the conversation. The idea of a gigantic, tentacled sea creature no longer belonged only to fantasy. The ocean had proven once again that it could produce life on a scale that once seemed unbelievable. And the giant squid was not alone. Deep-sea research revealed other candidates for real-world Kraken. Sperm whales, for example, regularly dive to great depths to hunt these huge squids. When whalers hauled in their bodies, they often found circular scars on the whale's skin, marks left by the suckers and hooks of the squids they battled in the darkness. Those scars were like signatures from a war humans never see, carved into the flesh of one of the largest predators on Earth. Occasionally, fishermen hauling their nets from deep waters would feel an immense weight resisting them, then suddenly release. When they looked into the water, they sometimes glimpsed pale shapes twisting away, easily longer than their boats. To some, these were just giant squids frightened by the nets. To others, they were proof that the Kraken still lurked, watching from below. In the 20th and 21st centuries, technology pushed even further. ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, descended thousands of meters beneath the surface, carrying cameras into the blackness. For years they returned only shadows and hints. Then, at last, clear images appeared. A giant squid, alive, its arms trailing like banners in the deep. Later, another species even larger was documented, the colossal squid, with thicker arms and fearsome hooks. These real animals do not perfectly match the Kraken of myth. They do not crush ships or create gaping whirlpools, but they show that the ocean is entirely capable of producing life on a scale that once seemed unbelievable. The line between legend and reality grows thinner with every new discovery. And as the scientific picture sharpened, another question emerged. If the physical form of the Kraken could be traced to real cephalopods, what about the rest of the legend? The fear, the awe, the sense of being watched by something vast and unseen. Where did that come from? To answer that, we have to look not only into the ocean, but into the human mind.
Even when science began offering rational explanations, the Kraken refused to leave human imagination. Instead, it grew stronger there. Writers, poets, and artists embraced the creature as a symbol of everything wild and unfathomable about the sea. In 1830, the English poet Alfred Tennyson wrote a sonnet simply titled "The Kraken." In it, the monster sleeps in the deepest places of the ocean, surrounded by ancient, dreamless, uninvaded waters. It lies in a kind of immortal torpor, waiting for the end of the world, when it will finally rise and die beneath the sky. Tennyson was not writing zoology. He was using the Kraken as a metaphor for something vast and hidden, something that exists beyond ordinary perception. Later, authors like Jules Verne took the idea in a more adventurous direction. In 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Verne's submarine crew encounters colossal squids that attack the vessel, wrapping it in a forest of arms. These scenes burned the image of ship-crushing, tentacled monsters into the minds of readers all over the world. As the decades passed, the Kraken appeared in paintings, films, games, and countless stories. Sometimes it was a literal beast. Sometimes it represented chaos, fear, or the unknown. The word itself became shorthand for any force that feels too large, too powerful, or too ancient to fully grasp. Why does this image grip us so strongly? Part of the answer lies in the psychology of the unknown. Human beings evolved in environments where most dangers were visible: predators on land, sudden changes in the weather, hostile terrain. The ocean, especially the deep ocean, does not follow those rules. Its threats are often invisible until it is too late. A wave that looks ordinary can hide a deadly current. A calm horizon can conceal a storm just beyond sight. Beneath the surface, there is darkness and pressure that no unaided human body can survive. When we look at the sea, we see only the top skin of a world that goes down for kilometers. Our imaginations rush in to fill the rest. The Kraken is one of the clearest expressions of that instinct. It is not just a big animal, it is a shape for our fear of depth itself. The idea that something massive, intelligent, and silent could be watching from below taps into a primal anxiety, the fear of being small in a universe we barely understand. There is also the way our brains interpret ambiguous information. At sea, visibility is often poor. Fog, rain, and the motion of the waves distort distance and size. A group of whales, a cluster of floating logs, or a swirling patch of seaweed can easily look like one enormous creature, especially to tired, frightened eyes. Once a story like the Kraken exists, those perceptions tend to bend toward it. The mind sees what it expects or what it fears to see.
But dismissing the Kraken as mere hallucination or exaggeration misses something important. Myths survive because they express truths, even if those truths are not strictly literal. The Kraken tells us that there are parts of the world and parts of ourselves that remain unreachable and unexplored. In that sense, the monster is not just a relic of superstition, it is a mirror. It reflects our curiosity, our anxiety, and our awareness that advanced technology and modern maps have not truly conquered the planet. There are still places where humans are guests at best, intruders at worst. The deep ocean is one of those places, and in our stories, the guardian of that realm is the Kraken.
Today, we live in an age of satellites and sonar, GPS and high-resolution maps. We can track storms from space, measure ocean currents in real time, and send robots to depths that would crush a human body in seconds. It is tempting to believe that there is no room left for monsters. But listen carefully to the way scientists talk about the deep sea. They call it the largest unexplored habitat on Earth. They estimate that most of the species living there are still unknown. Vast trenches descend deeper than Mount Everest is tall. Entire ecosystems thrive around hydrothermal vents, powered not by sunlight, but by chemical energy from the planet's interior. Bioluminescent creatures drift like living stars in eternal darkness. In this world, a giant squid is not a monster. It is simply one more inhabitant of a realm built on extremes. ROVs have filmed cephalopods with tentacles that ripple like flags in invisible currents. They have recorded sharks, fish, and strange translucent animals that look like drifting ghosts. Every expedition seems to reveal something that no one has seen before. And yet, even now, there are moments that feel like the first line of a Kraken story. A deep-sea camera catches only part of a shadow, too large to fit in the frame, before it glides out of view. A cable on the ocean floor is mysteriously dragged or damaged by something powerful. Fishermen in remote regions still tell of nights when the sea seems to thicken, when an unseen mass passes under their boat, lifting it slightly before disappearing. We no longer label these events as proof of a single mythic creature, but they remind us that the ocean does not owe us clarity. It reveals itself only in fragments. The Kraken, as a specific monster waiting to devour ships, may belong to legend, but as an idea, it is very much alive. It lives in every unanswered question about what moves in the darkness below. It lives in the scars carved into the skin of whales for battles we never witness. It lives in the moment when a sonar screen lights up with something enormous, then goes blank. Perhaps the most haunting thing about the Kraken is not the image of its tentacles or the size of its imagined body. It is the feeling it represents, that no matter how much we learn, the deep still keeps its secrets. When we stand on a cliff or a ship's deck and stare out over a dark sea, a small voice inside us still wonders what might be looking back. Not necessarily a single monster, but the collective weight of an entire hidden world. The Kraken is that world given a name. So the next time you see a calm ocean stretching to the horizon, remember the stories whispered by sailors centuries ago. Remember the bishop who wrote about the monster as if it were a real animal. Remember the giant squids, their arms scarred from combat, gliding through a place where sunlight never reaches. And ask yourself, if a legend like the Kraken could grow from half-seen shapes in rare encounters, what new myths are forming right now in the parts of the sea we still haven't touched? Because somewhere below, in that cold, crushing darkness, life goes on, vast, silent, and unseen. We may no longer draw the Kraken on our maps, but in the deepest parts of the ocean, its spirit still curls and drifts, reminding us that for all our knowledge,
we are still only visitors skimming across the surface of a much older, much stranger world. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Myst. Leave a like, share the video, and tell me in the comments which mystery you want next. Thank you for watching, and stay curious.